Hello, and welcome to SoE TV, that's School of Education TV. I'm your host, Dawn Crim, the Associate Dean for External Relations here in the School of Education. And today, I'm joined by Kristina Navarro, our 2013 Outstanding Recent Graduate Award winner. Welcome, Kristina.
Thanks, Dawn.
I am so excited that you're here. I've had a chance to talk with many of our award winners in the past, but you are the first time we've had a recent Outstanding Award winner who's just graduated basically 2 years ago. How does that feel?
Oh, it's just quite an honor. I'll be very honest. It's something that I really didn't expect, and I'm very humbled by the people at the University of Oklahoma who nominated me for this. So, very grateful.
So, at the University of Oklahoma, in 2 years, what have you done? What have you done that has made such an impact?
Sure. So I think I was hired as an assistant professor in their adult and higher education program, really at a time when they were trying to develop a new program around the nexus of intercollegiate athletics and higher education.
Okay.
So a lot of the work was working with the athletics department to craft a curriculum. And with that, also serving our students who wanted to pursue careers in higher education, specifically within athletics. So quite a bit of curriculum development and working with many different channels to bring all that together on campus.
Okay, and so in 2012, the degree that you received here from UW-Madison was from the Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis program.
Right.
And it's higher post-secondary and continuing education program.
Correct. Yes.
And so as a part of that degree, it was leadership in higher ed, but with a focus on sports and student athletes. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am an interdisciplinary scholar and practitioner by nature. I did my undergraduate and master's degree in sport administration and business administration. So with that, I really merged these two fields together to understand how we best prepare athletics administrators from a higher education perspective so that the place within higher education can really be valued.
Okay. So you're really able to kind of pull in the day-to-day practice work, but also think about some of the theory and research that can inform the day-to-day work that happens in athletics?
Exactly. So we do a lot with student development theory, and specifically how do we serve the student athletes in terms of their experiences. How do we help them engage with campus? How do we help them balance and navigate dual roles as students and athletes?
Okay. So were you a former student athlete?
I was. So I actually began as a Division I rower, and then I'm a transfer student myself and transferred to a Division III institution where I played volleyball and participated in track and field. So I've had kind of both sides of the spectrum personally.
So what would you say as a student athlete kind of channeling those two levels and two different schools, going from Division I in rowing to Division III in a more kind of popular traditional volleyball sport? What was that like?
Sure, I think it was definitely, for me, the move was motivated by academic decisions and also major choice and just personal passion, and I think that's really fueled a lot of my research to understand why people make major choices and how they develop career patterns. So for me, it was just a really foundational time in my life where I was able to craft a career plan.
Okay. Well, I was a former student athlete myself. I played Division I basketball, and as you talk about student athlete player development and having to sort of wear both hats, that so resonates. I mean, when I think about going to college, I knew I wanted to participate in my sport, but I knew I wanted to make sure I graduated with a degree. And make sure I focused on the academics along the way. And thinking about your research and what you're doing to inform the field now, what advice do you give academic advisors for working with student athletes?
Sure. I think it's really, we're at a crucial time for intercollegiate athletics right now. We have a lot of negativity. The narrative is very negative around student athletes. From the student affairs and academic affairs perspective, how do we work to change that narrative? And some implications or ways that we can perhaps do that is really focusing on programming that has learning outcomes that are specifically focused on student athletes who do aspire to career fields in this idea of life after sport. knowing that they're not going to go professional for the most part. We just had a session, the Beyond the Game showcase, where we talked a lot about, instead of having a plan A and a plan B, changing that narrative for the student affairs professional who works with the athletes to focus on dual plan A's.
Yep.
And thinking about them in equal light. And how can you focus on your academic side in addition to your athletic side without shortchanging either one?
That's great that you're looking at a simultaneous path, because with you being a former student athlete and myself, both of us being females,
Right.
we often focused on the academic piece, because going pro really,
That's an option,
you know, with the WNBA and other things, there are opportunities, but really it's a means to the end
Right.
in terms of getting the degree. But sometimes with our male counterparts, especially in football and basketball, you know, going pro is top of mind.
Right.
So it's great that through your teaching and the work that you're doing, you're informing those
Right.
academic advisors on making sure the student athlete is prepared for both, or
Right.
either, whatever the outcome
Right.
may be. So when you were a student here, what are some of the influences that happened on campus when you were thinking about you know, your research focus?
Yeah. I would say for me, research developed later in my trajectory. I never
Okay.
thought I would go into the faculty profession. I was
Okay.
very interested in the administration side and the student development side, and really was a late bloomer with respect to
Okay.
research, but started to really just see the different aspects of campus and how these aspects came together from an engagement standpoint, and how we could learn inform programs based
Okay.
on student outcomes. And for me, that was always very interesting, focusing on the student voice or the student athlete voice, and how administrators would include those voices
Okay.
to change and implement different types of programs.
Okay. And thinking about the Ed Leadership program, what about this particular program do you think has poised you for early success in your career?
Definitely. I feel that it's just been a pivotal, life-changing experience to go through the College of Education, or the School of Education, excuse me, here. Really just opening my mind to the wide opportunities out there. I think really understanding the faculty lifestyle was something that I would enjoy pursuing, and understanding how research can inform practice, and looking at it from many different angles, not only on the campus level, but more of a policy-wide standpoint, which the ELPA, the P being policy, something looking at it from more of that 30,000 level, and then
Okay.
also coming down and influencing practice on campus.
Okay. So I understand that you actually come from a Badger family. So even though you didn't necessarily do your undergraduate work here, other members of your family were former Badgers. Share a little bit about your family.
Definitely. So the School of Education runs very deep. The red doors run very deep within our family. My grandfather actually started as a doctoral student in the K-12 strand of ELPA. At the
Okay.
time, it was called Education Administration.
Yep.
My father and my uncle also went through the similar path with the PhD in Education Administration, and really have been foundational across the board in terms of me wanting to pursue education, even though, albeit the higher education side, but really instilling that value of education throughout my childhood and moving forward.
Wow. You know, a lot of times with families, you don't have as many people who actually have a PhD, or
Yeah.
nonetheless at the same school.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, but
Yeah.
it's very motivating, and I think I've always had a very strong example to follow after.
So growing up, did you have any fond memories of coming to campus as a child?
Definitely. I think Badger sporting events were always part of the childhood growing up. Very influential piece of our childhood. School of Education. My dad was going through the PhD program when I was about 5 years old, so I
Wow.
remember, him going to class and then coming back to pick me up and taking me to the park. So it was, it's been a part of my life for a long time, since I can really remember.
Wow. Well, we're glad you followed in their footsteps.
Oh, thank
and,
you.
Joined the program. And thinking about your visit and coming back to receive your award, you'll have an opportunity to give some lectures, if you will, and talk with graduate students that are pursuing a similar course. What advice do you have for them, for those who want to go into athletic administration and actually be an athletic director or an
Sure.
advisor, and those graduate students that are thinking about the research side? What type of advice do you have for them?
Sure. So maybe taking the first question. So really, I think there's been a large push nationally about thinking about how do we train athletic administrators from a higher education perspective so that we know that, yes, there are business aspects to the student-athlete experience and to the athletics administration unit within an athletics department, but how do we really train those individuals to think about things from a student development perspective and a higher education policy perspective so that we can kind of shift the paradigm a bit about all the negativity and the negative narrative that continues. So I would say to those students who want to be athletic directors who are in the ELPA program or in the Oklahoma program or regardless of where they are, stick it out and continue to focus even though it might not be the traditional path right now. I really see the paradigm shifting in terms of higher education being valued in that career field.
Okay.
And then for the researchers or the individuals that might not understand the importance of research and how it can influence practice, I would just say take a look at some of the literature that's out there around your topics of interest and really dive into those assignments that those professors are making you do because at times they actually are going to relate to what your critical thinking in ways that we can really elicit change in different types of systems.
Well, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the current topic of the day around athletics.
Right.
The Northwestern students pushing to see if that they're actually employees and wanting to unionize.
Right.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, and, it's again that negative narrative that continuously seems to circulate, and I understand the premise of what they're trying to do. I think definitely it's an area that's going to continue to change the way we think about intercollegiate athletics. Personally, I think it's a charge for individuals who are higher education professionals to kind of stand up and say, this is the educational benefit of the higher education experience and what we can bring to the student athlete and continuously moving towards that idea of the student athlete ideal. Even though it might not be the reality for some, how do we keep aspiring towards that versus just bucking the system and going in a totally different direction? So, and I really see that as the onus being on student affairs and higher education professionals to do that.
Do you think there's a difference in this discussion from the high revenue producing sports like football and basketball, hockey?
Sure.
As compared to, really there's 22 sports on campuses compared to the others, track and field, wrestling, baseball, softball.
Right.
Do you think the push in the dialogue is the same, or is it different based on revenue producing?
I would definitely say the narrative is different based on what type of sport. So you have your large football and men's basketball sports who typically are the revenue generators for the athletics department. I think we have about 5 to 6 nationally athletic departments that even operate in the black. So if we think about that, really everybody I think has this perception that it's a big money-making endeavor.
Right.
And when you look at the books, that's not really the case. So when you think about it, the football and the basketball, that revenue is generating revenue to support the entire department. So I think it gets a little complicated in terms of pay for play or unionization of athletes on how that would even be equitably distributed amongst an athletic department across divisions, across institutions. I think it would be very difficult to implement it.
Okay. And what role do you think the NC2A plays in this discussion, or even the Big Ten Conference? What role does the conference and NCAA play in this discussion?
I mean, I think every member institution is going to be different, and that's why even from a student development side, we don't have national learning outcomes that we then take down to the campus level. So I see it kind of as a double-edged sword. The NCAA being the governing body has to stand firm on some of its issues. And at the same time, I think they need to be open to how we best implement policies that are going to benefit the student athlete. And once we look at that end user or end person, the student athlete, we kind of work backwards versus having that top-down approach. So I see it very much as a dynamic relationship that needs to exist between the campus, the conference, and then the NCAA.
Wow, well said.
Oh, thanks.
I see why you're the 2013 Outstanding Recent Graduate Award winner.
Thank you.
And, thank you for being a Badger family.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for, personally understanding the plight of a student athlete and the support that student athletes need as they go down their career path. And because sport is just part of what we do.
Right.
It's life after that you're preparing them for. Thank you again for being here, and congratulations to you. What a fantastic honor.
Thank
and
you. Thank
so
you.
well deserved.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us for another episode of SoE TV, that's School of Education TV. And thank you to our video producers, because you guys do an excellent job. I really appreciate it, and our viewers appreciate it too. Take care.